Welcome to our new video series for distant learning, something we're putting in place now for 7th and 8th grade math to help you go through the lessons, help guide you through the lessons. Feel free, if you want, to just read through the lessons and do the work on your own. Save yourself a little bit of time. Or you can watch this and work through the lesson along with me, just like we do in class. This lesson is called percent increase and decrease. And the first vocabulary term that we're going to use is percent change. So the percent change is a comparison of the amount of change to the original amount. That's what we mean by percent increase or decrease. So first thing you need to do is when you look at a situation, determine, did the amount increase or did the amount decrease? As we're working through the process, we're going to have to use our familiar percent proportion, which in previous lessons we've learned was part over the total is equal to the percent over 100. So if you can take this ratio of the amount of change over the original amount, you can take those numbers and you can convert that ratio into a percent, which will give us our answer for the change. Now, how do we find the amount of the change? Well, that's where you have two numbers, right? You've got your new amount and your original amount. Now, how much did it go up? You do your new minus your original. And this generally becomes very intuitive. It's just how much did it change? How much did it go up? How much did it go down? You just write that amount on the top in where the part goes. And then the original amount is what you started with, and the problem will generally tell you that, so you write that on the bottom. Now, let's take a look at a situation where we could use this. Okay, so this is just a generic situation. Let's say you started with the number 50 and then it increased to the number 53. So the new number will be 53 while the original was 50. Well, how much did it go up? You can do that intuitively. It went up by 3, correct? So the amount of change will be the answer to the problem 53 minus 50, the new amount minus the original. And then you base that on the original amount. So the new amount minus the original is 3. The original amount is 50. Once you've got this ratio set up, you can now use your proportional reasoning, either the giant one or using cross multiplication, to figure out what the percent is. And in this case, since 50 goes into 100 2 times, we'll just use a giant 1. 3 times 2 is 6. So to go from 50 to 53 represents a 6% increase. And that's your answer. We just declare that as our answer. So I'm going to let you read through these paragraphs so we can go a little bit more quickly, but I would stress that you pay attention to these questions as you're going. When you read through the problem, identify, is it going up or is it going down? Is it increasing or decreasing? That's going to be something you're going to have to declare. Is it a percent increase, 6% increase, or is it a percent decrease, maybe a 4% decrease? At the very beginning of the problem, you should determine whether it's an increase or a decrease. Then figure out, what was your starting amount? Where did you start? What was the original amount? And then, how much did it change? Do that calculation in your head, set up your proportion, and then solve for the percent. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. Actually, I'm not going to pause. I suggest you pause and read through everything that is in this paragraph here and this letter here from Joe. Once you've done that, we'll come back and we'll start working through the problem. Okay, I'm assuming you paused, you read everything, and you're back. So the brief synopsis is this guy here runs a lawn mowing business and he wants to raise his price, but he heard that if you raise the price by more than 33%, people are going to be upset and they're not going to want to continue with that service. So over here it says that he had started at $12.50 per hour, but he's raising it to $15 per hour. So our goal is to figure out what was the percent increase and did it stay under the 33%? So here we've got an equation for part A that says 12.5 or $12.50 times X equals 15. So what does the X represent in this situation? That's the number that you're multiplying times $12.50 to give you 15. So X is the multiplier in this particular situation. So go ahead and copy this equation down and solve for X. Pause the video, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the process. Okay, now we're back. Hopefully you did everything. And you'll see that if you take 12.5 times x, that equals 15. We're trying to answer the question, what do you multiply times 12.5 to give you 15 for an answer? In order to do that, we have to divide each side by 12.5. That's going to create your giant 1. And then 15 divided by 12.5 will give us a decimal number, which is 1.2. So what does this 1.2 represent? Well, that represents 120% of the original amount, where the 100 portion of this is what you started with, the $12.50, and then the 20% increase was how much they raised the price. It looks like they raised the price by about $2.50. So what is $2.50 out of $12.50? That ends up being your 20% increase. So the fact that it went up by 20%, we're going to declare our answer as a 20% increase. Now, I could show this using the percent proportion very quickly, where we just say, okay, how much did it go up? To go from $12.50 to $15, it went up by $2.50. That's the amount of the change. Out of $12.50, what percent does that turn into? Well, you may choose to do cross multiplication here because you see decimals there, and finding a giant 1 might look complicated, but actually it's not. $12.50 times 8 gives you 100. So we'll multiply $2.50 times 8, and that ends up being 20. So if x is equal to 20, then this represents 20%. And since the cost went up, that would be a 20% increase for this situation. Paige is in a different situation. She wants to go rock climbing, and it originally cost $50. I'm going to go ahead and write original here, or I'll abbreviate that, $50. And the price went down to the new price of $34. So we already know this is going to be a percent decrease. The question is, what's the percent decrease? Before we can get there, we want to figure out what is the amount of the decrease. So here it says, draw a diagram or write an equation that represents this situation. I'm going to use the percent proportion for that. And here it said, without calculating, estimate the percent. So remember how to find percents. 10% would be $5, which makes $10 20%, and $15 would be 30%. Since that looks like the amount of change is about $16, then I'm going to say that's going to be pretty close to a 30% decrease or discount. That's my estimation. So let's go ahead and plug this in. The amount of the change, it went down by 16, and it was based on the original of 50. What percent is that? Well, here we've got a good problem for our giant 1. What do you multiply times 50 to give you 100? That's 2. So we multiply 16 times 2, and that is a 32% decrease. So what was the original amount or the whole value? The original amount was $50. What is the percent change? It ends up being a 32% change, and that was a decrease. So we would declare our answer as a 32% decrease. Here's a little bit of a better description of our definition, where it gives you a little bit more detail about what makes it an increase or decrease, but I think intuitively you've probably understand how I explained it. Okay, so this last problem we're going to work on is here to show you that just because the numbers are the same doesn't mean the percent change is going to be the same. In this situation, you've got a starting amount of $30 that goes up to $33. So how much does it go up? It goes up by $3, correct? And where did it start? It started off as 30. So we're going to set up our percent proportion and see if we can find a giant 1. Maybe we want to do cross multiplying to solve this problem. We'll get to our answer in a second. The second problem goes in the other direction. Now, while the amount of the change is the same, it still goes changes by $3. The original amount was 33 in this particular situation. So we are going to get a different percent. A lot of times students will do the percent increase, and then when it gets flipped, they think, oh, it's going to be the same percent, but it's just going to be a decrease. But that is not the case here. So let's go ahead and pause. I want you to solve for x in each one of these, and then come back to me in a couple minutes once you've figured those out, and then we'll see if you got the correct answer. Okay, so I'm assuming you did everything that I asked you to do. In this situation, when we cross multiply, we get 30x is equal to 300. So when you divide each side by 3, you get x is equal to 10%. So that represents a 10% increase. And I'll draw a box around that because that's our final answer. Now what happens here? This one looks a little bit more complicated. Cross multiplying, you get 33x is equal to 300. And now we have to divide each side by 33 instead of by 30. And that's going to give us a repeating decimal. Turns out x ends up being equal to 9.09 repeated percent. So if we were to round that up, we could say that was a 9.1% decrease. So by changing the order of these numbers, you change the original amount, which changes your denominator of your fraction. It's going to affect your percent. We got to make sure that we work through this process. So remember, percent proportion, part over the total. In this case, the part is the amount of change and the total is the original amount. You work through the process exactly the same. Use your calculators, show all your work, and you will have no problem understanding these concepts. Good luck.